I'm very happy to have everybody here today. It's a drizzly June meeting. And if you're interested in the ACT branch of the Statistical Society of Australia, you can go online or you can come chat with me or some of the others here. Today, I'm very happy to introduce Patrick Lee. So Patrick got his honors degree in econometrics and his PhD in statistics from Monash University and is now a postdoctoral fellow here in the Research School of Finance, Actual Studies, and Statistics at ANU. I'm very happy that he's at ANU and with us and also here to give a talk tonight. And the talk he's going to be giving is an end-to-end video-based system for street-based inspection, street food inspection using vision language models and source truth. I can't even, multi-source truth discovery. So thank you very much. Thank you for being here and giving a talk.
Yeah, thank you. Minimize this one. Yep. Sure. Oh, good. Oh, good. Clear now. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for the introductions. And let me repeat again about myself. I'm Patrick Lee, and I don't need to repeat that. I completed my PhD in Monash, and now I'm mostly in the ARGI project that working on computer visions and plant phenotyping work for the Australian grain industry project. And for today's work, I would first need to acknowledge my co-authors, Klaus Ackermann and Danny Tomasi. One is from the Monash University and one is from Italy. And this work is done during, I have a contract with Monash as a research assistant, and I assist them for doing some part of this work. And before that, we got some prior study contributors that contribute a lot to the Purist study, the Purist foundations of the foundations of this study. There's Alessi and Caitlin. One is from Russia and one is from also from Italy. And these are the two prior study publications that they have. Besides that, I also put up this slide in a website. I would just now paste it to the Zoom check, and you could use this URL to access this slide. All right. So here's the outline of today's talk. I will first talk about the problem setup, what kind of issues that we are facing, and what sort of data that we collect from the society. And then we'll talk about how we do so-called representative frame selections. And then the next part will be the visual large language model assessment. And lastly will be the when we have multi-source of data, we call it multi-source annotations, how we find the truth for them. So here's some brief background of what's our problem. So according to the World Health Organizations in 2020, there are over 600 million cases of foodborne illness and 420 thousands of deaths annually from contaminated food. And one of the main sources or concerning sources will be street food in developing countries. It provides a large source of employment, but it also has real concerns of food safety. And as you can see from these are actually real photos that we collected from India, that some of these environments are a little bit concerning. And so we need to have a protocol or a standard to assess how good or bad that food safety is. And previously, in these developing countries, or even in Australia, usually, we do this kind of strict food safety inspections by sending officers to each different vendors. But this process could be a little bit time-consuming and resource-intensive because the officer need to travel to multiple places and they need to do regular inspections for their vendor to ensure that it's actually aligned with their protocol. And also, sometimes will be limited in coverages. If you are short of human resources, you may not be able to check each vendor regularly. And also, the most importantly, sometimes they are kind of have some bias toward this vendor because they may be familiar with this vendor, or they may have a previous purchase in those vendor. And also, human being would have subjective interpretations of this scene, and they may say that this looks good and that may looks bad, but the other person may say, no, we should check this more strictly, and it looks bad. And so that funded by the FAO, actually FAO is a sub-department of United Nations. It's concerned about food safety. And we conduct an experience in the Kolkata, India, and the study was conducted in 2025. And we visit 244 vendors. We approached in total 328 of them, and 244 agreed to conduct this survey. And for each vendor, we send the officer to those vendors and visit around 1 to 7 times. And at each time, we record a long video about it, around usually at a minute. And then in total, we collect around 900 videos. And from those 900 videos, we use some algorithm that I will talk about a little bit later, extract around 6,000 images from them for different facility. We call it facility class. Basically, it's like hand washing stations, garbage bin, the countertop, or the dishwashing station. Those kind of really important facility in a vendor for food safety. And then in total, we send around 3 highly trained local surveyor or officers. You may ask us, why not sending more officers? Because you get more opinions. You have diverse opinions about it. Because some training, like asking this officer to align with the standard that we put out or the protocol that we put out is fairly difficult. The only 3 of them actually passed the test and be able to do the survey. So this protocol is quite strict. And then after they record the video and look at this vendor, they need to answer some questions. And it's just a multiple choice question, yes, no, or unknown. And I will show you the question now a little bit later. There's a really definite answer for this food safety. And here's one of the sample video that we collected in 2024 in July. Okay, so you may wondering why the officer is recording several different things. You may notice that it's recording different things and moving to different objects. That's because we asked them to specifically focusing on those facilities that we care about. Neither in the last one, this is the garbage bin, and in here, this is the hand washing station, and in here also another garbage bin. And in here, that's the countertop, like the food display area. And yeah, this is the water pond. We call it the water tank or the water stations that they store water in it. So these are those important facilities that we care about. And after we run the algorithm that I will introduce later, we will get these 6 classes of images. Countertop, food display area, we use those shorthand CT, DSGB, DW, WP, and HW to represent them. And you may wonder, well, will the algorithm successfully capture these images? I would say sort of, or mostly yes, because if you check all the videos that we recorded, these facilities are kind of really similar to each other. For example, if they are the hand washing station is always in this style, so it may different from the style hand washing station in Australia, but in that Kolkata area in India, those hand washing stations are really similar to each other, or all in this style. So the algorithm can kind of easily pick up what are those hand washing stations are. And then here's a question now that we put up that let the surveyors or let the officers to answer. And as you can see, for different category or for different class, we have multiple questions that they need to answer. Then the answer is always yes, no, or unknown. And I will just quickly run through some of those examples. For example, for the hand washing station, we will ask if the hand washing facility at least 1 meter above the ground level. So if it's high enough such that it will not contaminated by other source. And for the water point, we'll ask if it's covered by a lid, if the water storage tank, because we concerned if there are anything else get into the water tank. And for, say, the garbage bin, we'll ask if the garbage bin made out of a hard material. We're concerned whether or not you're using a hard plastics or metal garbage bin. That will be a better protections than a soft one. So these are the questions that we put up, then let them to ask and let them to answer. In total, there are 25 of them. And the next thing that we concern is that, okay, we got the video and we got the officer answer, the officer responses to the questionnaires. How do we actually automate the entire process? Now, say, for example, in the future, I record a new video for a vendor. Can I immediately answer the same set of questions by a machine? And that's the reason that it comes up to these representative frame selections. So a video essentially just a series of images. And we try to not just let the machine read all the images in a video, but read some selective frame, some representative one that will help to answer those questions. So let's denote those images in the video to be FT for frames, and T is like the time index. And the Pi9 consists of 6 stages, and I will talk about them one by one. Candidate frame selections, sharpness filtering, deprecations, object detection, feature extractions, and k-means clustering. So the Pi9 is a bit complex. I will explain it in details. So first is the candidate frame selections. So we got a series of images in the video. And the first thing that we check is if the image or each frame is, if it's a high motion or low motion. You know that when you move the camera, if you move it a lot, your image tends to be a bit blurred. So you can't really focus on the thing or the object in the image. So we try to check those low motion images. And the way that we do that is by using the so-called optical flow algorithm, using this Ghana-Farnback algorithm. These U and V notations here are those 2D vector field that describe the apparent motions of pixels between consecutive frames. So if you think of this as an apple or a car moving from the left-hand side to the right-hand side, and this optical flow can calculate the motions of the previous frame and the current frame. And it tells you how the car moves from the previous frame to the current frame. So it has a vector field, a 2D vector field in the entire image. And based on that, we take the square of the U is like the motion to it's like X and Y axis in the 2D vector field. We take that distance and sum them together. If the momentum or the magnitude is smaller than a threshold tau movement, we accept the frame. So basically in this operation, we filter out all the high motion frame. and only stable scenes are kept. And after we got these low motion images or no motion frames, the next thing we will check whether or not those frames are sharp enough. Now if we have enough detail that we can use for the next part. We then using the so-called variance of the Laplacian response. This is not something that we come up with. It's some very conventional technique in computer vision or an image analysis. The intuition behind that is, if you look at an image, each pixel will have an intensity, and we want to see how strongly that intensity change over the entire image. So if it change a lot, it means that there are some edges and it's sharp enough. But if it's so flat, the intensity over the entire image is really flat, it means that it's kind of blur. Now, a lot of them are not much details there. So the way that we define this Laplacian response is by taking the second derivative of the frame over the x dimensions and also the y dimensions. And this is just the variance. We take the mean, we use each of the pixels minus the mean and take the square, and we get the variance of the response. And we first select the frame if it's sharp enough. So there's another parameter that we need to tune, tau sharp. The third step, after we capture low motion images, sharp enough image, the next step is that we want to get rid of repeated images. Now, it's not needed. For example, if the previous frame is about a water tank, and the next frame is also about a water tank, but in a just slightly bit different angle, probably it's not needed. We just need one representative image to answer the questions. So we could use a technique called perceptual hashing. Perceptual hashing is just a class of methods. It contains a lot of methods in computer science. We just use the really popular one called image hash in a Python library. The rationale behind that is a little bit complicated, so I would skip the details here. But basically, it can impact or it can encode an image into 64 dimensions, 64 hidden dimensions, and with bit 0 or 1. So you can consider it encode the entire image into 64-bit information. And then we're using the Hamming distance to calculate the distance between a frame I and a frame J. So we want to see if the previous frame and the current frame SI, if they have enough distance to be distinct from each other. And a frame Fj will be removed if a previous frame Fi is more than a threshold distance. So if any previous frame is close enough to the current frame, we just remove the current frame. So easy interpretation of it will be that small distance means that two frames are visually very similar to each other and they're linear duplicates. So there's a good reason that we get rid of the current frame. All right. So after the step 1 to 3, here are some example of the images that were extracted from an entire video. Yeah, we can keep watching it. So you can see now the frame is clear enough, sharp enough, and also each frame to the consecutive frame. So I would not put. We need to talk about the next thing. Object detections. So once we get this individual frame, the next questions we want to ask is, because the question now that we design is focusing on different category, different food safety category, hand washing station, garbage bin, countertop, etc. So how do we extract those facility out of this frame? We can use I wouldn't say good old, but it's been there for at least 20 years. It's called object detections, especially for the YOLO class. We are using a pre-trained YOLO model. I would have an oversimplified explanation of what this YOLO model actually means. But basically, it would output three things for you. For a frame, it would tell you K output, this capital K. And K means that it has different bounding box, K bounding box in the frame. And for each bounding box, it would tell you CK, how confident it is for this bounding box. PK, CK is not confidence. CK is a class label. Now for this bounding box, is it hand washing facility or is it a garbage bin or what it is? A label attached to that bounding box. And then PK is the confidence, how confident you are with that answer. And BK is the bounding box dimensions. XY is the center locations of the bounding box, and W is the width, and H is the height of the bounding box. And an object is selected if it's confident enough. We set this tau OD to be around, if I remember correctly, around 0.85 to 0.9. So it needs to be pretty confident to be able to detect an object. And then we call this each bounding box as a CK, because once we got those bounding box in a frame, we can just extract that part of image out of the frame. We call it CK. And you may ask me, well, you talk about this YOLO model that can give you the bounding box and detect the thing, but how you train this YOLO model? Remember, from step 1 to 3, we got these many images from a single video. And if we repeat it 900 times for 900 videos, we got a lot of images. And we just ask the officer or just ask some surveyor to do the annotation for us. So we ask somebody to manually annotate each bounding box for us. So can you recognize this, if this is a hand washing station or this is a dishwashing facility? If you draw a bounding box for us, that will be our true label or true annotations. And in total, we got around 5,700 training images and around 600 test images. And the way that the YOLO model works, let's see if we can make it a bit larger here. Probably not. Yeah, that works. So the way that this is an oversimplified explanations of how a YOLO model works. So first, on the left-hand side, you got an input image. We first put it into a grid. So you got a lot of patches there. And for each patches, there are 2 branches. On the bottom branch, you predict, this is a multi-class classification problem. So yellow means one class, purple means another class, blue means another class. So for each patch, you predict a class, predict the most likely class from it, and also give it a confidence, like what's the probability of being that class. And on the top, for each patch, you treat it as a center and predict a bounding box for it. So here is a regression problem, and here is a classification problem. So on the top, you predict 4 quantities, your center, and the height and the width of your bounding box. But the center will be always in that small patch. So it becomes a regression problem. After you got this bounding box candidates and this probability for each patch for a specific class, you combine them together using a algorithm called long maximum suppression or something like NMS to get rid of this overlapping bounding box to get the most likely bounding box out of them. And then at the end, you got this nice object detected result on the right-hand side. So we basically do the same thing for the frame that we extracted from the videos and training it using, so this will be the true label, if you think of it, that we ask human to label this in this way, and then we use the model to train it in this way. And once we get each of these crop, we call it this crop here. Once we got this each crop, the next thing we do is feature extractions. You may wonder, wow, Patrick, you already got each of these crop for each facility. You got hand washing station facility, you got garbage bin. You already got this crop. Why do you need to do extra thing? Because for video, you may extract a lot of this facility out of an image. And we want to select those representative one, just for those really distinct from each other. We don't want to look at too many images because one of the things that we look for is efficiency. Now we like the model to be run on a small scale machine, like a mobile phone, and run it really fast. So we don't want to look at too many images at a time. So the way that we do that is by using a function. This is actually a neural network to extract feature of a crop into a 64-dimension real space. There's a 64-dimension vector. And the way that we get this feature extractor is by using a portraying mobile net V3. You may be unfamiliar with this terminology. This mobile net V3 is basically just a typical neural network classifier. You can think it as the typical classifier that tells you if an image is a cat or dog. That kind of really conventions classifier. And the way that we train it is kind of similar to how we train the object detection model. Because for each image, for each crop, we know the true label of it. So we can ask this model to predict whether or not it's a HW or CT or GB, that kind of thing. And once we train the model, we are not using the classification head of it. We remove the head and only using the output taken from the global pooling layer. So global pooling layer is a specific layer inside the neural network architecture. It would project the image into a low-dimensional space, which is in our case is 64 dimensions. So that's the way that how we use it. And this compact representations of the crop is kind of visual semantics of the object. So it tells you the shape, the texture, or the appearance of that object. And once we get the features of each of these crop, so each of these facility crop, we run a k-means for them. So why do we need that? Because when you run the k-means for these features, this 64-dimension feature, it tells you which crop are similar to each other and what crops are kind of different from each other. And we run it by setting the k-means to be 5, like 5 clusters. So we find 5 distinct and representative picture or crop out of the entire class of crops. And here's the crops, the final result after step 1 to step 6 for just one single video. And as you can see, there are at most 5 crops for each class. I'll make it a bit larger for you to make it easier to see. So this is for the countertop. It's actually looking at the countertop. And this is a dishwashing area. You may argue that these two are kind of similar to each other, but from the pixels perspective, they are slightly bit different. And for the hand washing stations, they are looking at different angle, but as you can see, they are still capturing the same washing station, but from different angle. And this is the water tank. So you're looking at not just the white one, you also look at those blue ones. and the garbage bin, and the food display area. So different, also from different angle. So remember, this video is only around 30 seconds to a minute long. So it not have enough, I wouldn't say enough detail, it not have much detail than you think, but we'll have a different angle for a same object. Okay, good. So any questions so far for this? So basically, we have talked about how we extract these facility images out of the entire video. Yep. Yep.
Why get the inspectors to just take a photo directly? Like, why do you need to go to this extra step? And then, like, it's quite clever, all the pre-processing.
Yep.
It is quite a lot of work. Can't you just instruct the inspectors to just say, just take a photo?
Yep. Let me repeat Emmy's questions. So Emmy is asking whether or not we just ask the surveyor or the officer go to the vendor and take this specific class of images. Yes, we could. But probably we would not have 3 officers, probably just 1 or 0, because they need specific training to be able to do that. And just like instruct them to take videos is already quite a lot of effort. So for us, it's good enough that they already use a video to capture all the objects that we want, that we can do it later. And we got the questions online. Could current LLM do all step 1 to 6? That's a good question. I believe yes. But it depends on how large the LLM needs to be. Now, because we are aiming for a small scale language model, a large, I wouldn't say large language model, but a small scale language model that can be run on a laptop or a mobile phone. So we will not be able to afford this really expensive language model. So especially we know that what we want to do. So these steps are kind of more meaningful than just throw everything into a language model. All right. So the next thing is, okay, we got the crop. We also have the questionnaires that presented to the surveyor or the officer to answer. Could we do the same thing for a language model? Of course, yes. Now, if we have used ChatGPT before, you will notice that ChatGPT has a function that allows you to upload a photo, and you ask something about that photo, and it will tell you something. And that's exactly the workflow that we have initially. So this is an initial workflow. We present it with the extracted crop. We give it a test prompt. It's the questions for this entire class. Now, because this class is garbage bin, so we just ask it for all the garbage bin questions and instructs it to just give us this really nicely format answer in a JSON, we call it JSON9. So in each answer, it will tell us what's the question number. And for the short answer, whether or not it's yes, no, or unknown. And it also gives explanations for why they think it that way. So we have checked this ChatGPT performance. It's actually quite well, and I will show you later the result for that. But the problem is, that's a VLM thing. I will mention it first. The problem with this approach is, ChatGPT could kind of be expensive sometimes. Now, if you just give it images and ask it to do the test promo, it could fairly quickly consume your tokens or your the amount of tokens that allowed it to use in a month. So if you subscribe for such a plan. And also, we don't want to leak this thing into a third-party company. So these are all contain some piracy or whatever sensitive data sometimes. It could be some human faces. So we just want it to run on a local government or mobile phone applications. So that comes to that will be later. But before that, I would first talk about how this so-called visual large language model actually works. Now, you may wonder how ChatGPT under the hood read this image and also read those texts and output us a text. And I will give a really oversimplified explanation of it. So this vision language model, or visual large language model, it first converts the text and images into something called tokens and map this token into an embedding space. So what is an embedding space? It's just a high dimensional real space. It could be 256 dimensions, 64 dimensions, or whatever dimensions that you specify. And then they use information in that latent space or embedding space to generate outputs. And for text input, for example, if you have a sentence, what is in the image? I will first do something called tokenization to split the sentence into tokens. Becomes what is in the image, question mark. Or I could do another style, is like do a subword. You cut this into WH and AT, or etc. And then once you got this token, it do an embedding lookup. For example, image would have a token ID 4312, and you have a giant lookup table. For each token, you have a embedding vectors. Of course, that giant embedding matrix needs to be learned during the training. But you can look it up, and then that sequence becomes a matrix. And the rows are just your sequence length. For example, here you got 6 tokens. So the sequence length will be 6. And D model will be the dimensions of your embedding space. For a small model, there could be 32 or 64 dimensions. For a larger model, it could be 128 or 256 dimensions. So this becomes so your sentence now become a matrix. And then for how about image? How do you handle image? Well, let's kind of do it in a similar way. You have an image on the left-hand side. You first cut it into, we call it patches, by using a grid. And usually each of these patches, 16 times 16, so in total 256 pixels in that small patch. And then because each pixel is a numerical value between 0 and 255, you just do a linear projections. So there's also another learned matrix that you do a matrix multiplications and project it into the embedding space, the latent space. At the end, you got this matrix here, number of patches, and also the dimensions of that embedding space. So for example, you got 9 patches here. This will be 9. And this D dimension will be, as I said before, 32 or 64 dimensions. And now we got the text embedding, we got the image embedding. The next thing is how we combine them together. Well, the easiest way to do that, you just stick 2 metrics together. Now you got a sentence matrix, you got a images matrix. You just put them side by side, stick them together. It will work. And actually many visual language models do that. Just stick them together. And it passes it to something called self-attentions. I will explain it later, what is self-attentions. And another way to do that is by using a more complicated operations, using something called cross-attentions, and treating the text token to be queries, and treating the image tokens to be keys and values. And these are specific metrics that happens inside the neural network. And we usually say that in this case, the text tokens attend to the visual tokens. So what do I mean by that? It all comes down to this. I wouldn't say ugly, but I have actually read this paper for multiple times. I still, for months, I don't quite understand how it works, but at some point I kind of grasp the meaning of it. But basically, considering you have an embedding matrix X, you can think it as when you stick your text token and image token together, that become an entire matrix X. You have this weight W, WQ, and WK and WV. They are all independent matrices that needs to be learned during the training. You produce Q, K, and V. This is called query, key, and value. And then you do Q, KT. This is one matrix multiplications. And then you divide it by the square root of the dimensions of that K matrix or this WK matrix. And then you do a softmax. What does it mean? What does this entire operation actually mean? You can think it as like query is something like 4 sentences. For each word in that sentence, what am I looking for? So which tokens you are looking for in that same sentence? And key is like what information is available from other tokens. And V is like the informations that I need to get from other tokens. And once you do this so-called self-attention mechanism, you get the right-hand side here, sorry. This attention matrix will look something like this. Here's a sentence. The law will never be perfect, but its application should be just, this is what we are missing, in my opinion. A dot and then the end of sequence or end of sentence and then a pad. This is one of the visualization presented in the original paper, Attention is All You Need in 2017. And what this green line means, if it's darker and thicker, it means that there's a stronger attention between these two words. So this attention matrix, after you do the computations, it gives you this relationship. And this relationship is always between 0 and 1. So it's like a weighting matrix. And you can see that, for example, this application will be attended to is, be just, and be perfect, or something like that. So it's the model saying that this token is more relevant to these other tokens. So it has a thicker line there. So the attention weight will be greater. And we can think it in the same way that because we stick our image token and text token together, the text will also attend to the image. So the sentence will, each word in the sentence will find which part of the image will be more important or more relevant to that word. And each image patch will also define which word in the sentence will be more relevant to that image patch. And after you do that, now that attention mechanism happens in this multi-head attention block. And then you do a sort of like kind of conventions in the neural network. You do layer normalization, you do a skip connections, a residual connections, and MLP just a feed-forward matrix multiplications. These are like technical terms in neural network that I will not expand in details here. But basically, it goes through a bunch of matrix multiplications, a lot of operations there. And also, as you can see, this L, they have an L times there, means that this block will be repeated multiple times. And in a really large language model, we'll repeat it 12 or 10 to 12 or even 20 times. So it's a really, really deep neural network. And the entire network could be, if you want to save it in your disk, it will be at least 20 gigabytes. Or sometimes if you want the full version of it, it will be some 100 gigabytes or 1,000 gigabytes, something like that. So it's a really large network. And the last thing is that you do this all attention mechanism. You fuse your text and image together. The last part will be how to emit text, how to let the model emit some text out of it. So the way that we do that is by, you got H. It's like when you updated your token, for each token, it has an embedding. And when it grows through a lot of this self-attention or cross-attention mechanism, it will update the embedding for each of the word. For example, your input could be what is the image is. The what the word token could be different in the input layer and in the final layer. In the final layer, the hidden representation could be completely different from the start because it has been updated and be more informative. And once you got the embedding for the last position, for example, for this sentence here, the last position will be this question mark. So all the information will be concentrated into that question mark. And you use that question mark information, the embedding, to multiply it to another matrix. The giant matrix will be of the dimensions of the number of words in a dictionary. So all the possible words that could happen in a dictionary or that you could predict. And you got the probability of each word that you will predict as a Lex token, and you do a softmax. So you get you make it to 0 from 0 to 1. And then you got a distribution of the next token, now the predicted distribution of the next token. And you could either select the most likely one, but that usually would not be the best strategy. Usually we would do a sampling for that to get. So sometimes that's the reason why you ask ChatGPT the same question, it will answer you different thing for different section. That's because we are doing some sampling there for the predicted conditional distribution. And once we got the next token, we put it back into the input and do it again. So it's just like auto-regressive prediction. You got the next token, stick it back to the input, do it again, get another one, stick it to the input and do it again until it hits the so-called end of sequence token. So this generation will stop. Or you set a threshold for it. You only can emit, say, 200 new tokens out of the sequence. So it's not, so ChatGPT is not actually generate the entire sentence at once. It generate each next token one by one until it hits the end of sequence. So sorry for distracting you from that VLM details. Now it goes back to why the reason we don't use ChatGPT. Now, as I said before, it's high cost. Sometimes ChatGPT could be quite expensive, not to mention if you would like to use cloud or other, say, GLM or DeepSeek or whatever models out there, they could be quite expensive. And also for privacy and security reason, we can't just send everything to third-party server. And more importantly for latency, if you have installed CloudX or a Codex or Cloud Code in your machine, sometimes you'll find that it does not respond really quickly. It sometimes has latency because the server is busy with other things or with other user. They will not immediately tell you the answer, but let you wait a little bit. But if you have a local server that running the model, it will not have the same issue. And also for task-specific performance trade-off, if you can train a small-scale model that can do the same thing and do it better, that would be like ideal situations. So that comes to the real usage of the applications that we have this lightweight open model. Open model means that the entire weight or entire parameter, the estimated parameter of the neural network is open, that you can just copy and paste it to your desktop and run it. We use two models in this study. One is called Polygamma 2, and the other is Florence 2. One is by Google, one is by Microsoft. And as you can see that even though they are, I call it small, the model itself, if you put it like this, is still 6 GB. And so compared to a linear regression model or whatever mixed model that we feed in everyday life, that wouldn't be small, but compared to those really large language model, now ChatGPT is quite small. And the other one, for instance, only 1 GB, it contains around 0.23 billion parameters in the model. So B represents billions of parameters. And there are some differences between these two open models. The Polygamma 2 using previously, I introduced a really simple mechanism to fuse your text and token, text and image. Just stick them together. This is also the way that the Polygamma did. And on the foreign 2 side, it uses a more complicated algorithm. It's called cross attentions. I don't want to explain it here, but it allows it to support multiple different tasking, multiple different tasks. If you, for example, if you ask the same sentence, what is in this image, question mark, but if you stick a different, we call it task token, in front of that sentence, it will give you a different answer. So for example, if you stick a caption, it will return you with some text. If you stick with some OCR, it will try to perform a different task and do it slightly different. So it has this ability because Microsoft team trained it in that way. So in the training data and it will provide it with a true label for that specific task. So we got multitask learning. And the way that we train these two open source model is by a technique called distillations. And specifically, this is hard distillation. There are 2 kinds of distillation. One's called soft, one's called hard. What's the differences? You can think of the soft as the variational based inference that you try to use a normal distribution to, or whatever restricted distribution to approximate a more complicated distribution. And soft distillation is kind of having the same idea that you use a simple classifier to map to mimic the predicted probability of the complex one. But the soft distillation has a conditions that you need to know what's the predicted distributions. Now you need to know the probability for each of the word in the next token. But of course, ChatGPT will not give you that. It will only tell you what's the predicted next token would be, what's the sentence in the mid. So we can only use these so-called hard distillations that we only use a true label. We treat the ChatGPT answer as a true label and train this to open model. And by the objective is to using the typical cross-entropy loss to optimize it. And sometimes you may heard of this is so-called the teacher-student model. This is kind of the same, similar idea related to distillation. And the next part I would talk about is the results. Now, for different methods that I mentioned before. Now, first is the object detections and also the visual large language model. So here's the object detection model result. I would make it a little bit larger and make it easier to see. So each column is the truth and each row is the prediction. And this is the confusion matrix. And as you can see for the garbage bin, dishwashing station, water tank, mostly they are on this diagonal, meaning that they have I wouldn't say really high accuracy, but it is a good accuracy. And for the countertop, it fails. A lot of them will fall into the background. That means that the truth is that there are some countertop in that image, but the model cannot pick it up. It will just miss them, so they become background. And the reason that it happens is because we don't have enough countertop examples in the image. It's one of the issues that we have now. Of course, now we realize, but previously we didn't realize that countertop is too similar to another class food display, this DS here. So how to distinguish between the countertop and the area that the food prepare and display? So they kind of have a similar meaning. So we just let it pass because under the hood, ultimately, we just want the questions to be answered. As long as you can capture certain images and answer certain questions, it will be enough to raise some issues. And On the right-hand side, this is an example of a YOLO model can do. And these are the frames of the training images, or it's actually not training images, but some validation images. And each of these bounding box has a label telling you what the model thing it is for each of these objects. And from here, you can see that on the top left, they say a lot of DW, so dishwashing station. It's actually correctly label them. And this is say that it is the food preparation area. And this is a water pot, which is also correct, that the white thing is a water tank. And this is the food preparation area. And there are some dishwashing thing there, also good. And there's a water pond. And let's look at something that's more interesting. Okay. It recognizes this is at the countertop, like this one here. That's also good. That's also the counter. And it recognizes this thing as a countertop. So you can see that it can notice something that human may not easily notice. That if you actually focus on it, of course, you will be better than a model. But we are talking about really large scale image here. You got thousands of images that this model can do it really quickly. For each of these instance, it can do it under 0.5 seconds or 0.1 seconds. So it's really, really fast. Okay, and then here's the results of the visual large language model that we train locally. One thing is that I need to be clear about the data set we use as ground truth. If the officer has the same answer as ChatGPT, we don't touch it. If the officer disagree with the ChatGPT, we let a field expert take in and use the field expert answer. And so the field expert has no control over whether ChatGPT or the original officer will agree or disagree. We just give it a set of data set and let it decide what's the answer. So the ground truth will be a mixture of officer opinion and field expert opinion. And we trust the field expert over the officer because that one is a more authority people that they're highly related to the protocol or the standard in the area. And as you can see, for those ground truth case, over 780 cases, ChatGPT actually have a quite good accuracy, around 77%. And those locally trained models are also learning quite well from the ChatGPT. And for those disagreement case that the field expert actually kick in, the 250 cases, officer actually did a really bad job. In those, we consider it as a higher confidence ground truth case. And Polygamma and Florence get a higher mark even than ChatGPT. And we also have compared certain instances that we also find certain instances that the ChatGPT or the local trained model cannot answer the question or answer the question incorrectly and give the incorrect explanations, but the officer can answer it correctly. But vice versa, we've also found certain cases that the officer will miss. For example, if we ask it whether or not there's a leak on the water tank, the officer will say yes. If you look carefully, no, there's no leak there, but the model can pick it up. So we consider that both models are not kind of truly ground truth. Like, they all have their own opinions. So we did a different study, and here's where I joined this project. So previously, all this periodic training thing, actually, I contribute to some part of those coding, but here's where I actually comes in as a statistician to provide opinions about how we actually get a more trustful labels, ground truth label. Now, I conduct two experiments. MTUG experiments as a Amazon mechanical Turk experiments. I present the participants with two sorts of data. One is the image. Well, we extract some images from the video and ask the questions. And we also present some short video that cut for different facility and ask the same questions. And for the qualification criteria, we restrict them to be in India and have a high approval rate, meaning that they are kind of trusted participants. To answer, on the right-hand side, here's one of those screenshot of the experiment. But here comes the problem that once we aggregate the data, we find that even though even the participants in these two experiments kind of disagree with each other. So the one that looking at the image and the one looking at the video have a completely different opinion about certain questions. You can see that certain questions have a high agreement rate, but certain questions, for example, now this one here about the animals, whether there are some animals around. Agreement rate only 34%. It's pretty low. And we further look into it. Sorry. And sorry, I guess it's better to just make it here in this way. So on the left-hand side, are there animals or insects around the garbage bins? And the right-hand side is another question that highly disagree with each other. Is the water after washing hands collected in the same container? So as you can see that at some time, the image will be closer to the officer. No, the one that looking at the image will be closer to the officer. And at some point, the people that looking at the video will be closer to the officer. So we can't just trust people looking at the image or people looking at the video. And they all have different opinions. So I conduct something called a truth discovery. And it's actually a not really popular domain, but there are some papers about it. They usually define something called a source trustworthiness. I would just call it the trust score, and also the belief score for each of the claim. And these algorithms, they all will be an iterative, deterministic, and score-based algorithm. And they first initialize some belief over each of the claim made by different sources. And then they update the trust score for each of the source, and then update the belief score for each of the claim until it converge. So here are some famous algorithm or the representative algorithm in that area. I will just talk about some really simple one. For example, this one. We collect for each of the claim made by a single source. We collect all the belief of those claims, and sum them together becomes the trust score for this source. And then for each of the belief of that claim will be aggregated from all the sources that making that claim and sum them together. So you can think of this is now, it's actually inspired from the website or the web technology, that how much I can trust each website. So if authority website link this website, I can trust it more. So this is how we originally design or develop this algorithm. And the rest is kind of similar to the one that I mentioned before. It's just different calculations or different considerations. And of course, as a statistician, we can't do that. These are deterministic and iterative thing. And I tried it, it actually works at some time, it reasonably well sometimes. But I would just prefer a statistic model for that. So we're just looking at a 1979, I don't know how to pronounce this man, but I call it DS model. Basically, we model two things. We consider each of the item or each of the case as a latent true label. It's a ground truth, but it's latent, the unobserved. And also, we want to model for each true label what's the possibility of each of the rater give different answer? Say, for example, if the true label is false, or if the true label is low, what's the probability of ChatGPT give the answer yes? So if we call it confusion matrix. And the way that I fit this model is by using 2025 R package. Actually, this package being around for a while, since 2020, if I remember correctly. It's called RADA, and they're using Bayesian formulations to fit this model. And it have a prior for it's a directionally for the it's called the marginal probability for each class to happen. And also for the confusion matrix is also have another prior. And I'll just skip that part and come directly to the result. We treat each item as a combination of vendor ID, video recorded date, and the question. And then we treat the MTAG based on image, MTAG based on video, and MTAG officer and ChatGPT as the raters. And we don't consider those locally trained model because they are just student learned from ChatGPT. And then the response based only yes, no, or unknown. And after estimation, we find that around 32% will be yes, 60% will be no, and only 7% will be unknown. And this model will give us the estimated ground truth for each item or for each case. As on the left-hand side, as you can see, the ChatGPT did the best, and the officer is also not bad. The MTAG image is actually more trustful than the MTAG video. And the locally trained models are slightly worse than the ChatGPT. And here's the confusion metrics for these four raters. As you can see, the officer don't have much unknown, and it's the same for the image, MTAG image and MTAG video, because these participants, I found that in MTAG, they're quite confident with themselves. Right? They usually answer yes or no. They seldomly answer unknown. And for ChatGPT, it's quite conservative. A lot of the time they answer unknown, especially when unknown is a true answer, it will answer unknown. So we got this estimated ground truth, and we got also the probability, this confusion matrix. The next thing we can do is by computing the confidence score for each response. So I want to give a confidence score for each claim made by each rater. For example, ChatGPT say, this is yes. How much confidence score I should give it to this response? As by doing a little bit of math of this posterior, this gamma ij is a posterior class probability from the DS model. You can think that this is the estimated ground truth. And this pi theta is the rate-specific confusion probability. So it's also model from, estimated from the model, that how likely when a ground truth is certain thing, or when ground truth is yes or no or unknown, what's the probability ChatGPT answer yes, no, or unknown. And when you do this posterior, you get this table here. So for this specific question, the MTAG image will answer yes, and the estimated ground truth is yes, and what's the response confidence of that answer of this response. And for those cases that it answered incorrectly, we will give it a lower confidence score. So in the future, when an officer give a score, we can also do it in the same way. Now, whether or not that officer's response is confident or not. And then in the last part, since we got the estimated ground truth, we can update the model. We can use this ground truth to get it back to the local large language model and retrain them. The retraining already finished, but the result is still under review by the associate professor in Italy, the Danny. That he said that he don't want to publish the result at this point, so I don't put it in the slide here. Sorry about that. But the point I want to make is that this entire process that you got a model and then you want to find because you have multiple sources, you want to find the ground truth, and then you try to update the model. And it could be a loop because you can't just rely entirely on the model. You still need to send the officer to record some new videos, or sometimes you want to do an expression, you still need to record a video and let the model to tell you whether or not it violates certain regulations. So you do have officer that periodically will record some videos, and from those videos we can extract new images, and we would ask the officer to answer those questions again, and we update the ground truth again and train the model again. So it becomes a loop that the model will become better and better. And of course, you don't need to always train your model from scratch. You just need to fine tune it based on the new data. And the entire pipeline can run on a local government server. That's really important. The inference step, like the step that you predict the thing, can run on your mobile phone, but the training can happen in a local server. And that's all my talk today. I hope that I'm not over time a lot. Sorry if it is. Yeah, thank you. And if you have any questions.
Any questions here? If there's a question online, we can start with that.
Yeah, so I will read it out here. So Sunny asks, what's a simple analogy of the model weight being learned through self-attention mechanism? Is it like a function? How to decide whether to do fine-tune or retrain the model? I noticed that very machine learning techniques have been used. Does that mean you do Pi9? Yes, we do Pi9. And what's a simple analogy of the model weight being learned through self-attention mechanism? You can think it as, if you have heard of the term recurrent neural network or long short-term memory, it happens in the 90s and 80s. It's a way that it try to capture the dependency between a word. It happened in a sequential data. It want to capture the dependency between a data at time t and data at time t minus k or something. So it's a window. And this previously, this RNN, recurrent neural network or long short-term memory, allows you to capture a short time window and long time window, but it's not that flexible. And now this self-attention mechanism allows you to capture the dependency over all the tokens. So over all the data in that sequence. And is it like a function? How to decide whether to do fine-tuning or retrain the model? Usually, there's a lot of experiments and paper found that fine-tuning almost always is better than train from scratch. Now, it converges faster, it converges better, and it allows you to use less data. So unless you are doing in a completely different domain from the pre-trained model, like if the pre-trained model is trained on cat and dog and things in your daily life, and you're doing medical data for X-ray scanning, so you're a completely different domain. You may need to train an additional adapter to adapt the pre-trained thing into your current model. Yeah, but I hope that answered the questions.
Are there any other questions here?
Yep.
Patrick, some of the sort of the success being quite low. So even if you end up concluding somebody was a safe vendor, would you eat the food?
I guess that's not depends on me. It depends on the local because we also conduct an M-Time experience in India, so they will be more familiar with that. They have a tolerance of food safety in the survey. So I believe that reflect how they feel if a food is safe or not. Yeah.
So my question was actually, what is the implication? Like in the sense that, is this something that basically the offices, like the government does quite routinely, and
Yep.
they want to effectively replace some of the office's duty? Is that sort of what it's heading to? Or?
Yeah, the true implementation is that we now need, I wouldn't say we we need 0 officer, we still need some officer to go to different places, but you can just quickly record a 1-minute video and then go. And instead of just checking them really carefully, or you can ask the vendor Excel or ask some pedestrian to record a video, a 1-minute video, and then upload to the local server and automatically answer certain questions about that. Yeah. Oh, thank you. So Sunny asked the question, last question, the main differences between image data, text data, and numerical data. What are the main differences between image data, text data, and numerical data? So because we only record video, so you can consider them as an image data, and text data is like the questions that we ask. So those are text data, but ultimately they all turn into tokens. So in a way, and numerical data, we don't have in numerical data in this study, but usually they are in a real value of vector or metrics. Does using different data types require standardization that will affect which machine learning techniques, algorithm you can use to solve a problem? Yes, of course. So under the hood of things that I skip or things that I didn't mention in this talk, there are a lot of pre-processing and post-processing needs to be done for image and text, and a lot of image analysis techniques needs to be put on to make the training smoother and more successful. Yeah. Any other questions?
Very quick one, I'm mindful of time. So I guess I wanted to understand why you need so much training for getting this video. Like it just looked like simple video around the food market.
So which part of training?
The part that you said that for somebody to qualify for taking the video, like only 3 people.
Oh, you mean the why we send so? Because we want the officer to not only be able to record a video, but also be able to answer the question correctly.
Oh, it's a question.
Yeah, the question part, they need to, because they need to do a sample exam. They do not need to do an exam first. If they pass the exam, they can be a surveyor. Yeah.
So eventually, when you deploy this, the idea is that person who's actually going to take the video doesn't have to be trained up.
Yeah, no. So yeah, unfortunately, that part is not managed by me. It's managed by the higher study contributors that they know more details than me. But from what I heard from them, that's the training they need to do. They need to sit in the exam. Yeah.
Okay, I think we'll stop there for tonight. We want to thank Patrick again. That was very interesting. We can chat more at dinner.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.